The first thing I noticed when I came home from my doctor's appointment that afternoon was the silence. My house was always filled with small sounds, the ticking clock over the mantel, the faint creak of the floorboards when the wind blew, but that day it felt hollow, emptied of something that belonged. I set my handbag on the counter, turned toward the jewelry box on the dresser, and felt my heart stop. My wedding ring, the gold one with the tiny sapphire that Harold gave me 43 years ago, was gone. For a few seconds, I thought I'd misplaced it. I'd taken it off that morning because my fingers were swollen, but the velvet slot where it lived was empty. So was the space behind the photo frame where I sometimes hid small valuables. Then I heard laughter from the kitchen, bright, careless laughter. Amber, my daughter-in-law, was leaning against the counter, sipping a smoothie, scrolling through her phone. She didn't even glance up when I said her name. Amber, I repeated, louder this time. Have you seen my wedding ring? It's missing. She looked up with that airy smile she always wore when she was lying. Oh, that old thing. Evan sold it this morning. We needed the cash to pay off the credit card. My stomach dropped. You what? Don't act surprised, Helen. She rolled her eyes like I was being dramatic. You haven't worn it in months. It's just sitting there collecting dust. We figured you'd want to help out since you live here rent-free. Rent-free. The words stung. After Harold died, I'd moved in with my son and his wife to help with the grandkids. I paid for groceries, utilities, and most of the kids' clothes, but to Amber, it was never enough. I gripped the back of a chair to steady myself. That ring was my marriage. Harold gave it to me on our first anniversary. You had no right, please, she said, cutting me off. It was just a ring. You can get another one at Walmart. The cruelty in her tone wasn't new, but this was different. This wasn't about a disagreement over laundry or meals. This was theft of something sacred. When Evan came home that night, I tried to reason with him. She sold my ring, Evan, without asking, he sighed, rubbing his temples. Mom, it was a tough month. The hospital bills from Lily's tonsil surgery. So you sell my wedding ring? He looked ashamed but didn't apologize. We'll make it up to you. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I'd learned over years of small humiliations that yelling only gave Amber fuel, so I swallowed it quietly. That night, I took out the small photograph I kept of Harold holding my hand on our wedding day. His eyes were soft, kind, the sort of man who used to leave love notes in the flower jar. You'd never let them do this, would you, Harold? I whispered. The next morning, I called the pawnshops in town. None had seen a ring matching mine, but one owner said a young woman had come in the previous afternoon, asking for an appraisal, not a sale. She said it was antique with engraving on the inside, he recalled. I told her to try a jeweler instead. Engraving. My heart gave a painful twist. There was no engraving on the visible surface of that ring, but there was something inside it. Years ago, before our 10th anniversary, Harold had the band reinforced by a local craftsman named Mr. Levin. I remembered the day clearly because he'd insisted on surprising me. Later, when I accidentally dropped the ring and saw a faint seam inside the band, he just winked and said, "Some things are meant to hold more than they show." I never thought much about it again, until now. If Amber had taken it to a jeweler, she might have discovered that tiny hollow space inside the band, the one Harold told me was our little secret. And suddenly I wondered, what if he'd meant that literally? Amber's behavior over the next few weeks only deepened my suspicions. She was constantly on her phone, whispering to someone. Packages began arriving, expensive makeup brands, new clothes. Evan didn't seem to notice, or maybe he just didn't want to. One evening, as she flaunted a new designer handbag, I said gently, "I thought you sold the ring to pay bills." She smirked. "Oh, we did. But the jeweler gave us more than expected." I tilted my head. "How much more?" She hesitated, then shrugged. "A few thousand. Why, you think he underpaid me?" "I think he may have overpaid," I said softly, watching her face tighten. Something flickered in her eyes, fear, guilt. It was gone a second later. That night, I opened my old file cabinet and dug out the original paperwork from our wedding rings. There was a receipt handwritten by Mr. Levin himself, and at the bottom, in neat cursive, a note, "Custom hollow band, sealed compartment, interior contents as per client instruction." My breath caught. Contents. It wasn't just sentimental value. Harold had hidden something inside my wedding ring. The next morning, I called the number printed on the receipt. It was disconnected, but after an hour of online searching, I found a listing. Levin and Sons Jewelry Restoration, 47 Maple Avenue, still open. I called. The voice on the other end was older, raspier. Levin speaking. "Mr. Levin," I said, my heart thudding, "you made my wedding ring over 40 years ago." "Helen Whitmore." There was a pause, then a faint chuckle. "Ah, Harold's wife, I remember that job. You said there was something inside the band. I can't discuss clients' private requests, he said gently. But if the ring ever comes back to me, I'll know it. I left my mark under the stone. I thanked him and hung up, my mind spinning. If Amber had sold the ring to a jeweler and that jeweler found something sealed inside, then she might have no idea what she was holding. But I did, and if Harold hid something in there for me, then maybe, after all these years, he'd left me one last way to stand up for myself. I just had to find it before she did. 2 weeks passed before I caught a break. Amber mentioned offhand that she needed to pick up a repair from the jeweler downtown. I offered to babysit the kids, masking my interest behind a tired smile. When she left, I went into her vanity drawer, a sin I justified with desperation. Among the clutter of lipstick and receipts, I found a folded slip of paper, valuation receipt Greer & Co. Jewelers. The date matched the day she'd sold my ring. I sat down slowly, the paper trembling in my hands. The note at the bottom made my pulse quicken, client to return upon completion of inspection and item restoration. She hadn't sold it at all, she'd left it for restoration. Why? That night I waited until everyone was asleep, then called the number on the receipt. A young man answered. Greer & Co., how can I help you? I'm calling about a ring brought in by Amber Whitmore, I said carefully. A gold band with a sapphire? He hesitated. I'm sorry, ma'am, but we can't discuss client pieces without authorization. I smiled faintly. I understand. I just wanted to know if the work was completed. There was a short pause. Yes, ma'am, it's ready for pickup. The client was notified last week. So she hadn't even gone back for it. I thanked him and hung up, heart pounding. If Amber had forgotten or delayed, then I still had a chance. The next morning, I asked Evan to drive me to the pharmacy. But when we passed Maple Street, I said, "Oh dear, could you stop by that jewelry shop? I think I dropped my bracelet there last year." He looked confused but obliged. When we walked inside, the shop smelled faintly of polish and old wood. Behind the counter stood a thin, silver-haired man. "Good morning," he said. "How can I help?" Before I could speak, Evan's phone rang. He stepped outside to answer, leaving me alone. "I'm here about a gold sapphire band," I whispered. "It was brought in by Amber Whitmore. It belonged to me originally." The jeweler studied me, eyes narrowing slightly. "Mrs. Whitmore, I presume?" I nodded. He sighed. "I suspected something was off. The engraving under the stone matches my late father's work, and there was something inside." My breath hitched. "Inside." He turned and unlocked a small drawer. From within, he lifted a velvet pouch and set it before me. I haven't tampered with it since finding the compartment. I thought it best to let the owner decide. I opened the pouch. My wedding ring glinted under the soft light, smaller than I remembered, but still perfect. I felt tears sting my eyes. He placed a small tool in my hand, twist gently at the seam. My fingers trembled as I did. The band separated with a soft click. Inside was a tightly folded piece of parchment, so small it looked like a fragment of a secret. I unfolded it carefully. It was Harold's handwriting. "If you ever feel alone, this will lead you home." Beneath the words was an address and a key symbol etched in ink. I stared at it, uncomprehending. "What is this?" The jeweler smiled softly. "I don't know, ma'am. But I think your husband left you something more than love." I thanked him through a haze of disbelief, slipped the ring back into my pocket, and walked outside. Evan was still on the phone, pacing by the car. I said nothing. That night, when everyone was asleep, I looked up the address. It was a property on the edge of town, a small cottage on Rosewood Lane. My heart skipped. Harold and I used to picnic there when we were young. He'd once said, "If I could build you a world, I'd start it right here." The next morning, I took the bus. My hands shook the whole way. Rosewood Lane hadn't changed much, just quieter, more overgrown. The cottage was still there, paint peeling but standing proud. A sign hung crookedly on the gate, "Property of H. Whitmore Trust." I froze. The key symbol on the letter wasn't just decoration. It matched the emblem carved into the old gate latch. I pushed it and the gate opened easily, as if it had been waiting for me. Inside, the cottage smelled faintly of cedar and dust. Sunlight streamed through cracked blinds, illuminating a small table with a single envelope resting on it. The handwriting on the envelope stopped my breath again. "My Helen." With shaking hands, I opened it. Inside was a notarized deed dated 20 years ago. The property had been placed in a trust under my name, funded by Harold's life insurance, with accumulated interest to be released upon my retrieval. I sat down hard. My late husband had left me a house, a secret one, and then tucked at the bottom was a second paper. It was a legal instruction to Harold's old lawyer, Mr. Cohen, specifying that the trust could be converted into liquid assets upon demonstration of spousal duress or loss of primary property. I pressed the letter to my chest, tears falling freely. Harold had somehow known. He'd known there might come a time when I'd be taken advantage of, left with nothing. I walked outside, looked up at the sky, and whispered, "You clever man." But the triumph was short-lived. Because when I returned home, Amber was waiting on the porch, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. "Where were you?" she demanded. "At church," I lied. She snorted. "The jeweler called. Said some old lady claiming to be me picked up the ring." I smiled faintly. "Well, maybe he got confused." Amber's lips tightened. "Don't play dumb, Helen. That ring is mine now." "No," I said calmly. "It never was." She stepped closer, voice rising. "You think you can mess with me? You're lucky we even let you stay here." Evan opened the door then, looking weary. "What's going on?" "Your mother stole from me," Amber snapped. Evan looked between us, uncertain. "Mom," I met his eyes steadily. "I didn't steal anything that wasn't already mine." For a moment, none of us spoke. The tension was sharp as glass. Finally, Evan sighed. "Enough." Everyone calmed down. Amber turned and stormed inside, muttering, but I saw something flicker in her eyes before she did, fear, because she didn't know what I'd found, and I had no intention of telling her, not yet. For the next few days, I pretended everything was normal. Amber carried on with her usual arrogance, tossing passive-aggressive comments like confetti. But every night, after everyone went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table studying Harold's papers under the dim light. The trust deed was ironclad. It named me as the sole beneficiary and granted full control of the Rosewood property and its assets to me upon demonstration of loss of residence or coercive control by relatives. It was almost eerie how accurately Harold had predicted this. Still, I couldn't just tell Evan. He was too entangled, too blinded by loyalty and guilt. If Amber suspected anything, she'd try to manipulate the situation again, so I played the role she expected. The quiet, grateful mother-in-law. I smiled through her barbed remarks. I cooked her favorite meals. I even thanked her when she reminded me to contribute to household bills. But inside, I was making a plan. One afternoon, while Amber was out and Evan was at work, I took the bus downtown to see Mr. Cohen, the same lawyer listed on the trust document. His office smelled of leather and dust, the kind of place where secrets slept soundly. He looked up from his papers as I entered. "Mrs. Whitmore, my goodness, it's been years." I smiled faintly. "I think Harold left me something and I may finally need it." When I handed him the documents, his brows furrowed, then lifted. "Well, he did this right. This trust was designed for your protection." "Protection?" He nodded. "Your husband anticipated that if you ever lost your primary residence, say, through coercion or exploitation, the trust assets could immediately be liquidated and transferred to you." "No probate, no delays." "Liquidated?" I repeated. "Essentially, Mrs. Whitmore, this cottage and its account are yours outright. You have around $430,000 sitting in a trust-managed fund." I gripped the armrest. 400, that can't be right," he smiled. "It's accumulated interest over decades. Your husband was a prudent man." I sat in silence, a storm of emotions tightening in my chest: relief, grief, gratitude. Harold had provided me with freedom, quietly, thoughtfully. Mr. Cohen's voice softened. "He also left a letter, sealed with your name. I've kept it all these years." He slid an envelope across the desk. My hands shook as I opened it. "My dearest Helen, if you're reading this, it means life has tested you again. You always gave more than you kept, and I feared someday someone might take advantage of that. So here's my promise. You'll never be without a home, and you'll never be without choices. Use this only when your kindness is mistaken for weakness. Then stand tall. You'll know what to do. With love, Harold." Tears blurred the words. I folded the letter carefully. "I know exactly what to do," I whispered. That evening, Amber was in the living room, watching one of her influencer shows when I came home. I noticed she'd moved my framed photo of Harold from the mantel to the hallway bench. "You redecorating?" I asked mildly. She shrugged. It didn't fit the aesthetic. I just smiled. "Oh, I understand. Everyone wants a fresh start." That night, I typed a letter to Mr. Cohen, authorizing the liquidation of the trust assets. The next morning, he confirmed. The transfer would complete within 10 business days. While I waited, I began visiting Rosewood Cottage more often, cleaning, airing it out, polishing the old cedar furniture. It became my sanctuary. One afternoon, as I swept the porch, a friendly woman from next door waved. "You must be Helen, I'm Grace. We've been keeping an eye on this place since the owner passed." "Thank you," I said warmly. "It was my husband's." She smiled. "He must have loved you dearly. He paid the property taxes 20 years in advance." I blinked, stunned. "He what?" Grace nodded. "Said he wanted this place waiting for someone special." I managed a smile, though my throat ached. Harold had thought of everything. The final act of cruelty came a week later. I returned home from the cottage to find my suitcase by the door. Amber was standing nearby, arms folded, eyes bright with that sharp satisfaction she wore when she thought she'd won. "We need the room," she said coolly. "My cousin's moving in for a while. You'll be fine at a retirement community. I've even printed brochures." Evan stood behind her, face pale. "Mom, it's just temporary," I said softly. "After I raised you, paid your bills, helped with your children, now I'm temporary." Amber smirked. "You've had a good run. Time to downsize." It was the same line she used when she sold my ring. I didn't argue, I just nodded. "You're right, Amber, it's time." She blinked, thrown off by my calmness. "Good, I'm glad you agree." I smiled, a slow, measured thing. "Just let me gather my things. I'll be out by Friday." As I turned toward my room, I saw Evan's eyes flicker with guilt, but he said nothing. That night, I packed quietly, some clothes, photographs, Harold's letter. In the morning, I left a short note on the kitchen table. "Thank you for everything. I won't be far," and then I walked away without looking back. 3 weeks later, Amber called me. I was sitting on the porch of Rosewood Cottage, tea steaming in my hand when the phone buzzed. Her voice was shrill. "Helen, we got a letter from the bank, something about the mortgage being bought out." "Did you do something?" I smiled into the sunlight. "Yes, dear, I did. I purchased it." "You what?" "The house," I said gently. "Your house, technically, but as of yesterday, it's under my ownership. Your mortgage was overdue, wasn't it?" I made an offer the bank couldn't refuse. For a long second, she didn't speak. Then faintly, "You can't." "I can," I said, my voice steady. "And I did," she sputtered. "So what, you're my landlord now?" "Exactly." The silence that followed was pure, perfect music. That night, as the crickets sang and the moonlight silvered the cottage walls, I took my wedding ring from my pocket and turned it in my fingers. The little seam was nearly invisible now, but the weight of it felt different, heavier, stronger. "Thank you, Harold," I whispered. "You gave me back my home and my dignity." I smiled, imagining Amber's face when she saw the first rent invoice. Amber didn't take the news well. For the first few days, she called repeatedly, angry, frantic, trying to guilt me into reversing what she called a misunderstanding. When that didn't work, she shifted tactics. "Mom," she cooed on voicemail, her tone syrupy sweet, "I think we got off on the wrong foot. Maybe we can talk. Evan's really stressed. The kids miss you." I saved every message. They were almost entertaining. Then came the day she showed up at the cottage. I was pruning roses by the porch when her shiny SUV pulled into the drive. She stepped out in designer sunglasses and an attitude that could sour milk. "Nice place," she said, scanning the property. "So this is where all the money went." I didn't rise to it. "Tea," I offered, brushing soil from my gloves. She followed me inside, looking around with open curiosity. The cottage smelled of lemon polish and lavender. I'd restored every corner to its former warmth, photos on the mantel, fresh curtains, Harold's chair by the window. "You've redecorated," she noted. "It feels like home again," I replied, pouring her a cup. Amber took a sip, then set it down with a little clink. "I think there's been a big mistake," she began. "You see, the mortgage was purchased," I interrupted calmly, "by me. Which makes me your landlord." Her lips twitched. "That's absurd. You can't just—" "Oh, but I can," I smiled faintly. "You see, your loan was delinquent by nearly 3 months. The bank was eager to close it. They even thanked me for the clean paperwork." She blinked rapidly, her confidence faltering. You set me up." I tilted my head. "No, Amber, you set yourself up when you thought I was powerless." The silence between us thickened, filled with unspoken reckoning. Finally, she rose, snatching her purse. "You'll regret this, perhaps," I said softly, "but I doubt it." Over the next several weeks, I received emails from her, mostly formal notices full of threats she copied from Google searches about tenant rights. I ignored them. My lawyer, Mr. Cohen, handled everything with dignified efficiency. Eventually, Amber had to accept the reality. Every month, she would pay me rent. The first check arrived late, scrawled in shaky handwriting. I deposited it without comment. Evan called me that night. His voice was low and strained. "Mom, why are you doing this? You're tearing us apart." I closed my eyes. "No, sweetheart. I'm just no longer letting her tear me apart." He hesitated. "You could have told me. I did many times. You just weren't ready to listen." Silence stretched between us. Then softly he said, "She's furious." "I know," I said. "Sometimes anger is the only mirror people can see themselves in." By midwinter, the ring had become something of an obsession for me. I kept it on the nightstand, occasionally slipping it on just to feel Harold's presence again. One afternoon, I noticed the seam had loosened slightly. A tiny hairline gap had formed near the inside of the band. It caught the light strangely, like something was wedged beneath the surface. Curious, I took it to Mr. Cohen's jeweler, a kindly old man named Leo, who'd known Harold from the old Rotary Club. His shop smelled of polish and time, full of tiny drawers and soft ticking clocks. "Ah, Mrs. Whitmore," he said, squinting at the ring under a magnifying glass. "Haven't seen this piece in decades. Harold designed it himself, you know." "He did. Oh, yes, very particular man. Wanted something with meaning." He turned the ring slowly, then frowned. "Well, there's something inside." "Inside," he nodded. "Looks like a hidden compartment. May I open it?" My heart quickened. "Please." He reached for a thin tool and gently pressed along the seam. With a soft click, the band split, revealing a tiny, folded strip of parchment no larger than a postage stamp. Leo's eyes widened. "Would you look at that?" I took the fragment with trembling hands. The ink had faded but was still legible. "Safety Deposit Box 412, Riverbend Bank, for Helen only. Proof of ownership enclosed." I felt the room tilt slightly. "Riverbend Bank," I whispered. That's where Amber refinanced the mortgage." Leo smiled knowingly. "Your husband must have planned ahead." That evening, I went to the bank with Mr. Cohen. The manager, after some verification and a stunned look at the document, led us to a small, private room. Inside the deposit box lay a sealed envelope and a small velvet pouch. The envelope contained an official deed, transferring full ownership of the Whitmore residence to me, effective upon proof of mistreatment or breach of good faith by a family member. Harold had even notarized it decades earlier. Mr. Cohen chuckled softly. "Your husband was a quiet genius." The velvet pouch, however, held something else, a second ring, identical in design but heavier. Leo confirmed later it was pure platinum, set with a subtle row of tiny diamonds. "Worth a small fortune," he murmured. I slipped it onto my finger and felt something I hadn't in years: power. Not vindictive, not cruel, just solid, earned power. When Amber received the legal notice transferring ownership of the property back to my name, she stormed over again, this time with her voice trembling more than her hands. "You can't do this," she cried. "You'll ruin us." I met her gaze, calm as still water. "You sold my ring, Amber, my husband's final gift. You humiliated me, made me feel small in my own home. I lost everything because of your greed." Tears welled in her eyes, though I couldn't tell if they were real or strategic. "I thought it was just jewelry." "No," I said quietly. "It was a promise." She looked around the cottage as if searching for an escape. "What do you want?" "Respect," I said simply, "and an end to the pretense that kindness is weakness." She swallowed. "And Evan, that's between you and your conscience." For once she had no retort. She turned and left without another word. That night I sat by the fire, Harold's letter in my lap and the new ring glinting on my hand. I felt no gloating, no triumph, just peace. Harold had given me tools, but I had chosen the path. I had turned humiliation into quiet strength. When the wind shifted through the window, I almost heard his voice again. "You'll know what to do." I smiled. I did love, I finally did. For weeks after that, I heard very little from Amber or Evan. The silence was its own kind of relief. I tended my small garden, repainted the porch railings, and baked again for the first time in years, lemon bread, Harold's favorite. The scent filled the cottage and somehow made it feel lighter, as if the walls themselves were exhaling. Then one morning, a letter arrived. It was from the county clerk's office, notifying me of an upcoming hearing regarding a disputed property transfer. Amber had filed an appeal. Mr. Cohen sighed when I brought him the letter. "Desperation," he said simply. "She's clinging to whatever narrative she can build, but don't worry, we'll handle it." Still, I couldn't help the tremor of anxiety that ran through me. The thought of another courtroom, another round of accusations and lies, it all felt exhausting. But this time I wasn't the frail widow begging for fairness. I was the rightful owner, armed with Harold's meticulous forethought and my own quiet resolve. When the day of the hearing came, the small courtroom buzzed with low murmurs. Amber arrived in a tailored black suit, her hair slicked back like she was auditioning for control. Evan followed behind her, looking worn and thinner than I remembered. He wouldn't meet my eyes. I sat beside Mr. Cohen, hands folded neatly in my lap. Amber's attorney, a young man with more bravado than experience, argued that I had coerced her into an unfair transaction. He called it elder manipulation, the irony of which was almost funny. When it was our turn, Mr. Cohen stood slowly, his voice calm and measured. "Your Honor, the evidence is clear. The deed was transferred legally, in accordance with a binding clause drafted decades prior. Mrs. Whitmore's husband foresaw this exact circumstance: mistreatment, neglect, or exploitation by a family member. The ring, the bank deposit, and the documentation together prove his intent beyond dispute." The judge examined the papers carefully, adjusting her glasses. "So this was hidden inside the ring all along?" "Yes, ma'am," I said softly. My late husband wanted to make sure love came with respect and consequences. The judge's mouth twitched as if suppressing a smile. Well, Mrs. Whitmore, I'd say he succeeded. Case dismissed. The property remains under your name. Amber shot to her feet. This isn't fair. That house was supposed to be ours. The judge looked at her over the rim of her glasses. Perhaps next time you'll read the fine print before selling someone else's legacy. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Even Evan lowered his gaze. When the gavel fell, I stood quietly. My knees trembled a little, but it wasn't from fear. It was from release, the kind that seeps all the way into your bones. Outside the courthouse, Amber followed me to the steps. You ruined us, she hissed, tears streaking her makeup. We can't afford rent, the bills, nothing. You did that, I said evenly. I just stopped carrying the blame for it. She glared, her voice trembling. You think you've won. Everyone will see you for what you are, selfish, manipulative, strong, I corrected. You meant strong. She opened her mouth, then closed it. For once, she had no words. Evan lingered behind her. When she finally stormed off toward the parking lot, he stayed. He looked at me, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. Mom, I didn't know. I swear I didn't. I believe you, I said gently, but you didn't want to know either. That's what hurt most, he swallowed. She's not all bad. I never said she was, I replied, but she made choices, and now she's learning what choices cost. He looked away, ashamed. I'm sorry. I know. I touched his arm lightly. Take care of your children, Evan. Teach them what respect means before they have to learn it from a judge. He nodded, eyes wet, and walked away. Life after the hearing felt quieter, steadier. I leased the Whitmore house to a young couple, a nurse and her husband, both earnest and kind. The rent payments helped me restore the cottage completely, and every month I deposited a portion into a scholarship fund Harold had once dreamed of starting for local students. Sometimes on Sunday afternoons, I'd see Amber's SUV drive past slowly, as if she couldn't resist checking that the house still stood. It did, of course, and it looked better than ever. One evening, I received a letter from Evan. Inside was a photo of the children and a note written in his careful handwriting. Mom, I don't know if you'll forgive me, but thank you for showing me what love looks like when it has boundaries. The kids miss you. Maybe we could come by sometime, just us. Love, Evan. Tears blurred the words, but they were warm ones. I wrote back simply, the door's always open. A few months later, Leo the jeweler stopped by the cottage. He'd brought a small, wrapped box tied with a satin ribbon. What's this? I asked, smiling. He grinned. A thank you. I've never had so many people ask about that ring story since you came in. Half the town's been gossiping about the widow who outwitted her daughter-in-law. Thought you might like a little souvenir. Inside the box was a delicate gold pendant shaped like a ring. Its band opened just slightly, revealing a tiny hollow center. Hidden strength, Leo said, seemed fitting. I clasped it around my neck, feeling the cool metal rest against my heart. It's perfect, he winked. That husband of yours would be proud. I think he is, I murmured. By spring, the garden was alive again, daffodils, peonies, lilacs bursting with color. Every petal seemed to whisper renewal. Sometimes I sat on the porch at dusk, sipping tea and listening to the crickets. The world had righted itself quietly, without shouting or vengeance, just balance restored. And every time the ring caught the light on my hand, I remembered what Harold had written on our wedding day, long before the trials, long before the deceit. Our love will outlast circumstance. What we build in kindness will guard itself. He had been right. By summer, I'd found a rhythm again. Morning walks down to the lake, tea with my neighbor Lillian on Thursdays, and quiet evenings tending the herbs Harold and I once planted together. The air had that soft sweetness only small towns seem to keep, the scent of cut grass and distant rain. But peace, I've learned, doesn't mean immunity from the past. It means knowing what to do when it comes knocking again. One afternoon, as I was trimming the rosemary, Lillian appeared at the gate holding a newspaper. Her eyes were wide. Helen, dear, you'd better see this. On the front page was a headline, Local Realtor Faces Fraud Allegations. Beneath it was a photo of Amber. I read the article twice. Apparently, she had been caught falsifying listings and misusing escrow funds. The investigation was ongoing, but the tone was clear. Her career was likely over. I felt no glee. Just a quiet, inevitable sort of sadness. Choices again had caught up to her. Lillian studied me carefully. You must feel vindicated. I shook my head. No, just finished, like a door finally closed. She nodded, thoughtful. Well, if you ask me, you handled it better than most would have. Maybe, I said softly. Or maybe I just finally learned to stop setting myself on fire to keep others warm. A week later, I got another unexpected visitor, Evan. He looked tired but clearer somehow, as if months of denial had burned away. He brought the children, Ella and Luke. They ran up the path with shy smiles and a small bouquet of wildflowers clutched in their hands. Grandma, Ella squealed, hugging me tightly. The word hit me like sunlight through clouds. Grandma, it had been so long since I'd heard it. Evan stood by awkwardly, hands in his pockets. I hope it's okay we came. Of course, I said, my throat tight. Come in, all of you. Inside, the children admired the old photos, asking about Harold's fishing trophies and my wedding picture. Their laughter filled the rooms that had once known only tension. After I tucked them into the guest room with cocoa and stories, Evan and I sat on the porch beneath the string lights. She's moving out, he said quietly. Amber. She said she needs to find herself. I nodded. Sometimes losing everything is the only way to find what matters. He stared into the night. I should have protected you. I laid a hand over his. You were trying to protect the family you built. You just forgot the one that built you. His voice cracked. I'm so sorry, Mom. I squeezed his hand. Then start fresh, be better. For your kids, we sat there a long while, watching fireflies blink over the grass, saying nothing more. The next morning, I took Ella and Luke into the garden. They helped me pick strawberries, their laughter echoing through the yard. Grandma, Luke said suddenly, Dad said you have magic jewelry. I laughed. Did he now? Yeah, he said you had a ring that made bad people tell the truth. I smiled. Something like that. Ella looked curious. Can we see it? I took off the ring, showing them the small seam Harold had built into it. Your grandpa made it for me a long time ago. He hid a secret inside, but not magic wisdom. What's wisdom? Luke asked, scrunching his nose. It's knowing what something's really worth, I said gently, even when others don't. Ella touched the band.